Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy, a literary podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels. This is Jack.
And I'm Amy, and during this season of Book Club, we're stepping away on Thursdays to explore topics we've recently written about on the Subtext Society Journal. This week, we're discussing the revision process. Is it hell or hell?
The Subtext Society Journal is a space for critical thinking and cultural reflection on the genres that are too often dismissed, including romance, romantasy, fanfiction, and the narratives that live rent-free in our hearts and minds.
We're creating a bridge between academic analysis and the everyday reading experience, between highbrow literary commentary and the deeply personal way books shape who we are.
We publish thoughtful essays from our readers, ourselves, and guest contributors that explore the moral questions, genre evolutions, and cultural conversations happening in real time.
We are redefining what deserves serious attention in publishing, and we're doing it with feeling.
The views expressed in this episode are entirely our own and are not meant to represent the larger opinion of the bookish community. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation. Readers and listeners are encouraged to share their own analysis and thoughts.
Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Okay, if anyone's watching, or if anyone's listening, I am currently in Kentucky. It's December 18th, and it just started raining. And I don't know if there's going to be thunder that happens. Yeah.
I don't really hear anything.
Good. But sometimes when the thunder starts, it's scary. And then as I tell my mom, I'm like, there's a reason why people think that God's angry here, because I would too if I had this type of thunder. Also, I'm not from Kentucky. My family's not from Kentucky. I have to make that clear.
There are plenty of people who are from Kentucky who are lovely people.
Yeah, but not my family. No, except for Aunt Amy. She's great.
I was going to say one of Emma's best friends who is gay is from Kentucky.
Yeah. No, there be good people here. Yeah. So if it sounds a little different, if it looks a little different, if, you hear God angry in the background, it's just thunder. But yeah, we are here to talk about revision. Is it hell or hell?
It is hell. Hell. Mm-hmm. That's what I think it is.
Hell. Like in every rendition and every variation you can say of hell, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. It is it is the worst part / the best part.
Yeah, it's so interesting because sometimes it's like a ton of fun. And other times I want to claw my own eyes out. And
then you go through every single emotion. But before we do that, I just want to say that Amy and I are authors. And you, listener, if you've written anything, you're an author. You did it. You made it. You're an author. I just want to get that out of the way because sometimes I think people have it in their head that they're only an author if they've published something. And I want to start this off by saying, remove your imposter syndrome. We're leaving that at the door. That is not this conversation. Everyone here is an author, except for the people who don't want to be authors and they're just here for the vibes.
Right. You're very welcome to be here. But I think what's most important is what Jack said about kick your imposter syndrome to the curb, because everyone we talk to, has things to say and has done rounds and rounds and rounds of revision.
Yeah.
You don't get to cut corners the more you're published.
If anything, you get more corners the more you're published. So a little bit of our own credentials. I have written 2 books. Neither are published yet. One contemporary romance, one romantasy. And I am currently in the querying process? Sort of. We'll get to that.
I have also written 2 novels. One is a romantasy that took me 10 years to write and will never see the light of day. And then another is a contemporary sapphic romance that I am currently trying to revise.
Nice. So I will say one of our credentials, anyone has credentials. Like, I don't want to do this in like a snobbish way because, there's a lot of cons to this credential, but Amy and I both have our bachelor's in creative writing. I have my master's in comparative literature. And while we learned a lot during creative writing, it did hurt us in many ways. But Amy has a lot of strong feelings on this.
I have so many feelings about this because the English language, especially, you learn the rules of the language to break the rules. You learn the writing rules, you break the writing rules. It's when you know too much, you tend to overthink. And that was what creative writing class did to me. It stifled my imagination. It made me think too hard about the thing I was writing while I was writing it. And so it created a barrier for me for many years where I used to be very prolific with writing and then couldn't write a paragraph for a long, long time.
I will say there's the counter to that where we also learn how to identify what makes a good book a good book.
Right.
There is a formula. There is something to it that is beneficial, and we learned a lot there. And I wish they had done things differently. I didn't want to be a short story author, but that's all we got to do. And they didn't teach us like some of the other fundamentals if you want to be a novelist. But we learned, like, we started this podcast to be better writers, because when you analyze other books, you're able to tackle your own books. But like you said, we know when we've written something bad. Like, that's the unfortunate thing, is that we then hold ourselves to a much critical standard. And I think what we've both learned this past couple years is like the first beginning of it, writing your first draft, you are just getting it on the page. Do not even look at your book or read your book. One of the best advice the only way I was able to actually finish either of my novels was advice from Kate Golden. Watch me name drop. I go listen to any of the interviews we've done with her. I don't know if she says it in her interviews or if it was like during dinner, but basically she said, don't read the previous chapter. Don't read it. You outline, you map it out, and, maybe the last paragraph, but like, you do not go back and read it. And that was the only way I was able to finish something, because several reasons. One, you're going to want to keep reviving and being like, oh, like I can't, I need this chapter. I need it to be more like this. I need it to be like, you get stuck in that process. And then two, if you're stuck in an energy or in a funk on one chapter, you don't want to bring that energy to the next chapter. You kind of want a fresh start every single time.
Right. When she said that, it like changed my world, because that was the exact grueling cycle I got trapped in with my romantasy that took 10 years to write. Every time I took a break, I'd have to go back and I would read chapters, and then I'd want to revise those chapters instead of writing the next chapter. Or I'd write the next chapter and be like, oh shit, I got to change this in the last chapter. And so I'd go back and change the last chapter. And it just was horrendous. And you never felt like you make progress otherwise.
And I know some people are pantsers. I know some people are detail outliners. I'm more outline, but there has to be for me a level of pantsing where, I kind of have to be like, all right, middle part, you're going to have to tell me. And then I get freaked out because then I'm like sitting at my computer. I'm like, okay, now I have to be creative. Shit. Now I have to think about something. But through all this, through perseverance, through pushing, we did it. And you, listener, who have written your book, you did it. You've done the first draft. It is your precious little baby. You have put your blood, sweat, and tears into it. Maybe it took you a month. Maybe it took you 6 months. Maybe it took you a year, but you have done your first chapter. And you know what? You've only done maybe 20% of the work.
And by chapter, she means manuscript.
Manuscript, yeah.
You've done that first draft, and it's my ugly baby. Only I can see the beauty within.
But like, when you look at it, though, it's the same thing where it's like, you can call your baby ugly, but you don't want anyone else calling your baby ugly. And you end up being very protective of your ugly baby. And this is the part that creative writing class did drill into us. 80% of writing is editing. And once you accept that fact, once you accept that you've written it, you've only scratched the surface. It makes the remainder of the work I mean, not easier, but at least not as daunting. Oh, no, it's still daunting. It makes it at least acceptable.
Yeah. I think what I did not realize with my first book that I realized in my second book is that the revision process does not have to be one elaborate process. It can be multiple iterations where you focus on one little thing. And then it's like building layers. It's building, I don't know. In my head, I'm all of a sudden I'm thinking of geology and sedimentary rocks. And it's like, that's where my brain went.
It's, you're building geology. You're building the Grand Canyon, really. Kind of. Yeah.
You're building the earth.
I mean, and you do have to take it step by step. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the way that it's worked for us because we're currently in an extensive revision process for our own novels. And we'll tell you what we are doing. This is in no way, shape, or form the only way you can do it. Like, there are so many ways to do revision. The one thing I can emphasize is that there's no getting away with revision. Like, that's the thing. You can revise your book in many different ways. This is not the end all be all, but you gotta get off of your pride and be honest with what you're reading and accept revision is going to be a big part of it. And I say that because I have met a number of authors. I have seen a number of people online, and I'm not talking about any authors that we've interviewed, so none of them. Anyone who we've interviewed has talked about the extensive revision process, but a lot of people online and just general conversation has been, they don't like it. They don't like the idea of revision. They are resistant to it.
Yeah. And I mean, I used to be one of those people. I hated in school when I had to write a paper and then I would have to do multiple drafts and then a final draft. And I didn't understand the process. So I'd be like, okay, I'll add an image here and I'll change some wording there. But I think when you live in a world where you're always procrastinating and then just barely meeting a deadline, the first draft is the final draft. You don't go back and revise. That is not the book world. The book world is, we're doing as many rounds of revision as we can possibly fit in until we decide collectively, as whoever your team is, that none of us can contribute anything more at this point.
Yeah. So let's talk about the general process that we have done. Because like I said, we're both in the middle of revision. And another piece of advice that I've done with my revision, and when you're writing the first draft that I have to remind myself, is from, again, name dropping. When we interviewed Thea Guanzin, she said to us, talent comes later. Talent comes later. And halfway through my book, I decided I'm going to do past tense. And then the other halfway through my book, I'm going to do present tense. And you're screwing it up and you're just sort of like, I'm going to have to go back and finish that. And that is one layer of editing. That's a layer of editing that I don't choose to do first. What I do is, another Kate Golden advice is, you've written it, you're done, print the whole thing and read it through once. Try not to take notes, but just go through the whole thing once, see how it flows.
Yeah. And there's a lot of emotions in that process of, wow, this is really terrible. Or, wow, I really hit my stride right there. Or, nope, it's back to terrible. It is.
Why am I doing this? I'm the worst writer in the world.
I am so ashamed that I let anybody look at this. I'm still in that stage.
I mean, but there are moments where I was like, wow, I nailed this. I mean, like, when you print it, that was the first, like, I print it at Kinko's. I remember. I spiral bound it, and it was just like, I stared at it and I was like, this is my child. Like, I did this. I made this. And it is a total moment of pride. And then the roller coaster of, why am I doing this? I'm the worst person ever, worst author. No one's going to read this shit. This is like, what did I even think I was doing? To like, am I good? Am I great? Is this going to be the best story? This is going to be a bestseller. And it is the most emotional journey. And, while Kate Golden suggested, you don't take notes, I couldn't help but not take light notes. And I would avoid grammar at this point. This has nothing to do with grammatical. It has nothing to do with past tense, present tense. There's nothing to do with that. In that first overview, especially for me, who's doing a fantasy, I have to be like, hey, babe, talking to myself, there's magic in this world, or like, what the fuck was that? Like, hey, what were you doing? Like, what does that make sense? None of this makes sense. It's a little bit different of a process for you when you were reading, because yours is a contemporary romance. So what was it like the first time that you were catching?
Well, I knew as I was writing that I would introduce things in chapters that I'm like, well, this has no context, and I'm going to have to remember to add something in an earlier chapter to make this make sense, or for it to flow. So as I was reading, I personally was really struggling with if I needed to change tenses.
Yeah.
Not tenses, point of view, POV, perspective. Yeah. If I needed to switch from third to first. But more as I was reading, I was looking for what are the fundamental errors I've created for myself. So, okay, I said in the beginning that Ben, who is Bingley in my story, Ben is going to be a business major, and then halfway through, he's going to be a law major, or like he's going into law. So like his internship at the beginning is going to be with Goldman Sachs, and then his internship halfway through is with a senator of New York. And I'm just like, well, okay, how did I get that wrong? So looking for those fundamental flaws was really, really important to create consistency.
Yeah.
I realized I'd skipped more scenes than I had previously thought I had skipped. So figuring out which sections I needed to write. So one of my characters has an abortion. I knew I had to write that whole scene because I've never had an abortion. I don't know anyone who's had an abortion within the last 5 years. So I have no frame of reference. So I need to go do research. So I'm not touching that. There were other parts where I was like, oh, I just didn't write the 3 paragraphs of intimacy I wanted to write here. I just said, they grind against each other, figure it out, and then moved on.
Sex stuff happens. There you go. Dry humping.
Yeah. Or there's a moment of, is it sexual assault? ? And then it's never addressed.
Yeah.
In the next 20 to 30 chapters. So for me, it was really identifying what are the flaws that make this unreadable, or what are the gaps that need to be filled, and fill those first. Because it doesn't matter if I'm going to change perspectives. It doesn't matter if, I need to do line editing if I haven't figured out the fundamental parts of the story that still need to be worked on.
You just got to get plot done. For mine, I wrote this like at the very end, in my mind, like this wonderfully tragic scene, this like with this character. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, shit, they didn't exist until I wrote this scene. And then I'm like, so now I have to go and like redo the entire thing and add them. And I mean, like, even as I've been redoing it, I was just sitting there going like, this entire middle part has to change. None of the middle can work now. I have to go from like, I like the beginning, I like the end, but this middle part is just not it. And I am trying to add lore. And that's the other thing that I know I have to stay away from is, what are the clues, right? Because I want to be able to give clues. I want to be able to build more lore. And initially, because it's like, okay, if the lore does not directly impact the plot, I need to back off of it. I can't touch it. It needs to be that like, what is the thing that gets you from A to Z? And you have to hit every single letter. There is no skipping W. There's no loosey-goosey L. It's like you really have to just get that part. And then you can go add the fun things. But it's messy. It's hard. It's hard to, because then you're just trying to remember everything. So then the process of it is taking notes. So I go through reading it again. I am writing in the margins. I am figuring it out. And I kind of came up with my own shorthand, because I'm just very much not capable of shorthanding it, of like writing it out. Let's see. Oh, I had RW, rewrite. So those would be like the lines or the paragraphs that like just didn't make sense. And I know I'm talking about the flow of everything, but sometimes there was moments that were so egregious, and I would try to leave it. I would try to not do that every single time, but it was like, oh God, that like no real words were said here. And then FO. Figure it out. It was just like moments where I was like, I thought I figured it out, and I didn't. And I didn't. And it's kind of like, that's at like a level of like, that's going to be harder for me to do. And then at one point I was like marking T for tense. And then I was like, we're going to leave that alone. Like there's too
many T's.
It was like too many T's. And then M, more, add so much more. And those would be the parts where I was like, this scene needs more depth. Or like, wow, I really bypassed this emotional beat. And, you know, when you're writing a book, yes, you need the plot to make sense, but you really need to figure out those emotional beats. What are the things that I'm going to say like physically kind of drives the plot, whether it's, I'm going to use what's a book? I always come back to Harry Potter, unfortunately, but like, it's one of those like things that we all do unless we can think of a.
Try Twilight.
No, it won't work for me. Okay. It's. So, like, because I'm trying to think of like my type of romantasy, and you can think of ACOTAR. Thank you.
Or Mist and Fury.
Yeah. So just anything like SJM, and then you can think of like a contemporary romance. So, like for me, like with Farah, she is physically taken from her home. There are some things that happen to her that are physically happening to her in her environment that's driving the plot, right? So there is Tamlin's holding a secret. She finds out that secret. Like, these are things that are driving her, whether she wants it or not, right? Like I describe it almost physical, whether it's physical or not, right? And then there's the emotional beats. Those are the beats that also drive the plot. When's the moment that she starts to fall for Tamlin? When's the moment that he starts to fall for her? What shifts? So you're mapping out these physical moments. Like, again, it doesn't have to be physical. It could just be like the things that are dragging this plot along. And what are the emotional beats that you need to hit, because that will also move the plot along?
The emotional beats were really hard for me, not because they weren't there, but because I did none of the interiority in my first draft. My first draft was intentionally only get them through the physical part so that I know what I'm working with. And so I can
like the dragging them along, the plot that drags them through.
Right. So that I can see, what do the emotions need to be? Does the interiority need to be figuring out? Like, what does Elle need to feel in order to have this transition in chapter 20? Like, to make what's physically happening believable.
Yeah.
I have to get the emotions right. But because I didn't know, I had outlined the book, but every chapter was a new discovery of like, okay, I know where I start, I know where I end. How do I get there? So I'm a bit of a planner and a pantser in that way.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was like, I don't know what the fucking emotions are. Just forget that.
I know. Well, what's also hard with contemporary romance is that is your plot. Right? Like that's 50-50. I think and in many ways, I argue that that's much harder than something like romantasy, because in romantasy, you kind of can have a balance between it's more romance or it's more fantasy. And, you know, like for me, mine's pretty fantasy forward, which I didn't realize it was until Amy was like, it's fucking fantasy forward. I was like, really? Wow. And with beats of emotional moments. So for me, I'm having to really like lock down this plot situation. And it's easy for me to do the romantic beats because like their hands graze. Okay. But because you're writing contemporary, and I have a lot of respect for contemporary romance that I don't think enough people have, it is 50%. And sometimes it's
more.
80%. Yeah. Like, sometimes it's like the actual plot thing that's happening is like, and then they go to a party and that's it. Like not much is happening, but you actually have a plot line that you're trying to follow through. And because it's a contemporary romance, the emotional parts have to hit so much more than what I would need to do. So I have a lot more respect for it. And I feel like as you've been writing it, it's kind of like another, not that you didn't have respect for it, but it's just another level of understanding.
Yeah, I think I also made it so much more difficult for myself because I'm also doing a retelling that people are going to analyze to the T. Because for those of you who don't know, I'm telling a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but it's sapphic. And for me, the first draft was getting the plot beats so that people see, oh, this is how she's honoring or paying homage to Pride and Prejudice. And here's where she's subverting Pride and Prejudice. So that was my first important part. But you're right. As a contemporary romance, this needs to be 50, 60, 70% romance. And going back and reading the whole thing, I'm like, where the fuck are the emotions in these people? So because I would say when I wrote my romantasy, I wrote purely the romance. And I'm like, is there a plot in here? So I've gone like a full pendulum swing in the opposite direction.
Though, I think that's a better pendulum swing when it comes to romance. Like, I don't mind contemporary romance where there's like not a lot going on and it's just the love story. But I really do appreciate when there's an actual, like when there's a through line plot for contemporary. Like, it helps me pace the love story. And it makes it more grounded for me personally. Again, nothing that's wrong with the other ones, but I find comfort in it. So it makes sense for a contemporary where you need to like ground that plot, you know, what's that through line? And then you can insert it because it really has to work out that way if you're going to add plot to your contemporary. But what I also find to be difficult, and I don't think people realize it, is that the character you start with is not the character you end with. And I don't just mean by like character development. I mean, you start writing and you have a general idea of who your FMC is, or in my case, and MMC. You got FMC squared. And you kind of have an idea of like who they are. But then you start writing it and you're like, okay, you're surprising me. You're doing a different thing. I didn't expect you to do what you were going to do. And you're learning them just as much as you're creating them. And then that means like, oh, well, now I have to like, eventually I'm going to have to go back and fix all that, because how are you to add emotional elements to it when you're just meeting your FMC for the first time?
Yeah, exactly. It's also hard when they do things that make them falling in love even more difficult. So for example, before I had any beta readers read my first 50 pages, I went from Darcy being Darcy to Darcy, female Darcy, being a fuckboy. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you were going to be a fuckboy.
Yeah.
And some people like the unexpected of that. But I'm like, it makes it harder to justify why she's all of a sudden head over heels for Elle.
You're like, why are you making this harder for me? There would be so many times when I was like, how's writing? And you're like, they just won't stop doing shit. Like, they're like, apparently they're still having sex, or like, you know, like it is funny when you're like, why did you do that? Why are you like this? I mean, I remember with my first scene with my MMC, I wrote him having a very violent initial meeting, and because, you know, morally gray. And then I was writing him and I'm like, oh, you are so not immorally gray. You're a soft boy. Like you are a sad little soft boy that just has a lot of feelings inside. So then I'm like, but I also need elements of that really jarring first meeting. And then I had to be like, okay, now I need to like figure that out and then rewrite it. I mean, the first part of my book was really rough, and I'm way ahead in the process than Amy, not because I wrote it before her. So it's not like I'm way ahead of her. No, like I wrote it before.
You've had more time.
I've had more time with it. And I should have more to show for that, to be honest. But my first few chapters were so rough. And then when I started the revision process, I actually really liked how I started my first chapters. And I really like how I introduced my characters and the beginning of that. And now I'm like, oh shit. Like now there's also, because I have a better idea of who she is, right? My FMC, my MMC, by the end of the book, I've like really realized who they are. Now I'm having to rewrite the beginning, and I have such a stronger understanding of who they are. But then that means I need to strengthen the thing out. And by the time I get to the end, they're going to end up being a little different anyway, because I've now started with who I know who they are. And then they're going to have to go through a journey. And so it's like you're flushing them through a whole new level every single time.
Yeah, that's just the process. And what's even worse, for those who do not have author friends who have enlightened them, we have been unfortunately enlightened. I would rather be ignorant. But the fact is you're going to revise 4, 5, 6 times yourself, and they're going to be like, wow, this is great. I'm going to query. And then apparently your agent also does a couple rounds of developmental editing with you.
I didn't realize how much
before it even goes
agent's
on,
developmental edit with them.
I didn't either. And that's before you go on submission to an editor who's also going to make you do developmental editing.
So
like,
if they're
no wonder why the publishing process takes so long.
I mean, it's only as fast as your own editing skills can go.
Right.
And, you know, so I know I'm going to go back to Kate Golden. She does many revisions, like on her own. And then she goes to betas, and she goes to like anywhere from 12 to 20 betas, and she has them because not everyone finishes the book. That was me. And only because I had stuff last time. Anyway, so like she'll go to 12 to 20 betas, and then she'll go through their notes, and then she kind of decides like, you know, soft, easy, medium, hard, and then which order to do, like get the easy wins, get the medium wins, then get the hard wins. And then she edits all again. And then it goes to her editor, or like her agent. And then it goes to the editor. And that's what blows my mind is the fact that like, because I asked her, I was like, so when do you give it to your beta readers? Because there was a one point where I was like, okay, like once I fix these things up, okay, I know I'm going to have some issues, but like, don't I want the beta readers? She goes, no, I wait until I look at it and I think there's nothing else I can do. And I'm like, but that's so many more rounds of editing on my part. Again, that's her choice. I feel like I would subject my beta readers to a little bit more torture. Like, I feel like I'd be like, you know what? I'm 80% there. And maybe that's not a good thing.
No, I mean, that's what I did with some lovely listeners who volunteered, sacrificed their time.
We didn't have a choice on what percentage we felt confident on that one.
Yeah. If I could do things differently, I would have taken a lot more time and a lot more revisions. Unfortunately, they read it at like 30% done.
Yeah.
Those first 50 pages, and they had a lot to say. And a lot of what they had to say was very, very valid. If I could do it again, I would wait until I was at a place where I was like, I truly think this is the best I can do without outside input.
I want you to not be hard on yourself. We were on a time crunch. There was a certain level of time crunch aspect to it that you didn't have the luxury of editing your first 5 chapters for a month ahead. And then, so, give yourself a break. It's be kind
in
to
the
yourself.
past. I can't even think about it anymore.
No. Because that's the thing is like when you know there's room for errors, then your beta readers are going to know that there's room for error and they're going to catch the ever living fuck out of it. And not all beta readers are going to look and read the same things.
Right.
Like there was some beta readers I had that were like, oh yeah, like this is funny. And they didn't even realize it, but they were catching some of the more emotional beats. And they're like, oh, this is a good moment. Or another one was like really catching all the clues I was leaving. And I was like, oh, okay. So you are picking up some of these like clues that come out later in the book. And then other ones were just like really calling out some other things that I was like, fucking hell, you're right. Like, that's a good point. Like, why is her magic coming out in different shapes? Like, what am I doing there? Why is it a spark in some places and a wall in others? Yeah. So it was like, okay, like, I don't know why, again, sometimes they point it out and I was like, how did I miss that? How did I not? I mean, again, I knew it wasn't 100, but you start to see it. And then I think it's up to the writer to decide what feedback they get. And I have been a beta reader or what feedback they decide to apply. Yeah, not get. Because I've been a beta reader before for someone and I just wasn't picking up what they were putting down. And that's completely okay. And, they needed to find a reader that gets their vision. There is a certain level of like, okay, they weren't getting it. And maybe they were trying to change it in a way that made sense for them. But like finding the right beta readers is such an important thing because you don't want someone you kind of want someone who's like, catch the vibes and, they're helping you with the vibes. But you also want people who are there to kick the tires in a way that makes sense for what you want the book to be. And not every beta reader is going to have the feedback that you are going to use, and that's okay. But you just have to be open to it and learn to identify, am I not feeling it because you're not catching the story, or is this hurting my feelings? And luckily, Amy and I have been through enough of this in college that like I have no feelings in this where I was like, all right, like my feelings were not hurt when people were pointing things out. I was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I was talking to our friend Savannah Gilbo, who we've had on the podcast before. She's a book coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to her about the beta process. And one of her recommendations was apparently there's a service out there that you can pay for with people who are trained beta readers, who have experience, who have been reviewed by other people that have had their stuff beta read. And, you know, you pay a fee, they beta read, and then an editor reviews all the beta reading.
Oh,
and
I didn't realize that part.
Yeah, and helps like shape it so that it's coherent to what you're looking for.
Ooh.
Yes. I need to go back to my notes with Savannah because I was like, that's what I need. I really appreciate anyone who's willing to sacrifice the time to read what I have to write. But I think there is also an art form to beta reading, and not just anybody can be a beta reader. Your mom can't be a beta reader if all she's going to do is be like, great job, honey. We all want the feel goods. But if you want to really succeed at your revision,
they need to kick the tires, but they need to kick the tires in a way that makes sense to what you're trying to achieve, because it's what we say on the podcast all the time. What is the author trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. And you need readers who get that. I mean, again, I've met authors that have and seen authors on TikTok that are like, I had beta readers. Like, they told me what was like their favorite parts. And it's like, oh, babe, that's not a beta reader. That's a style, but that's not what you need. And, you know, not every person is going to go in the traditionally published route, whether it's because it's their choice or because, you know, they're not able to get an agent or get picked up. The editing process, the beta reading process is even more critical if you're self-publishing then. You have like every single step that we're saying, going through the beta readers, getting an agent who developmental edits. Okay, so someone might not know what developmental edit is. So a developmental editor is someone who gets the plot, who figures out the plot with you, who might say like, okay, this scene logistically doesn't make sense. You need to, or like this plot line doesn't, you know, isn't working. Things shift.
Yeah. Or these emotional beats don't work. What if you rearrange these scenes?
Yeah.
They're really your partner as an external set of eyes who's invested in you telling your story.
They're your Jack Antonoff to your Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing where I don't know why people think that this is a solitary act when every other art form requires other people.
Right.
Maybe not artists, but like, you know, they don't count in this conversation at this point. No, but like, you know, music, film, you know, like everything else requires
a team.
So why do people think that they need to tackle this alone? Because you cannot tackle it alone.
Right.
And and I can say that confidently, like you just can't do it on your own.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I think it's also important to point out, we've been talking about beta readers. I would actually more appropriately call some of my first readers alpha readers, because alpha is the first letter in the Greek alphabet. And they're reading early on when you're not really done revising to tell you, are you even on the right track?
Yeah.
But there might not be your editor, or they might not be giving you editing advice. They might be saying, this plot line doesn't work for me.
You might not want alpha readers. Like, I think there's a lot of pros to alpha readers, and there's a lot of reasons why people might not want alpha readers. I can totally see wanting an alpha reader if I'm like, I don't know, what's when I'm like 80, 60% done editing. Does that then count as an alpha reader? I guess no, alpha readers are more with you as you're writing.
Yeah. So I think of several authors whose partner is their alpha reader, because the partner wants this person to succeed and knows how to speak to the person in a way they can understand without having hurt feelings, right? I think that's key. Like, an alpha reader needs to be someone you truly trust and respect. They trust and respect you enough to be able to communicate with you, because I think alpha reading is the hardest thing to do without spiraling.
Yeah. I don't know if I personally don't know if I would have an alpha reader, just because I'm very much, at least like it depends on what we're defining as writing, as like reading as you write. I don't think I would have been able to finish it if I didn't just throw everything, like throw up on this computer.
Yeah.
I couldn't finish this if I didn't just forge through. Yeah. And I'm like, again, so like, does that count as alpha reading? Do I skip it? But like, I know for me, push through. And then maybe for other people, they need that magic sauce that keeps them going. There's no right or wrong way. Again, arguably the wrong way is to go for people who just give you the vibes and are your yes men. There is a wrong way to edit and to do that. But if you're willing to just take the feedback, that's the hardest part, is learn how to be hungry for feedback, not defensive of feedback.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you have the opportunity to give someone feedback, we all have to learn the compliment sandwich.
It's so true.
It's so necessary for all of our egos. And like, think about how you would receive the feedback you're giving if it was your story. And that's so important.
Yeah.
Because would you really want to say what you're saying to yourself?
Yeah, I know when I beta read, I kind of say it way more conversationally, and I'll be like, you can totally ignore this, blah, 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 Yeah. And I go through and I definitely will be like, oh my God, I love this scene, or this made me laugh out loud, or trying to guess what's going to happen. So then by the time I do get to the parts that are confusing, or if it is confusing, I'll be like, I'm not quite sure what you're doing here. But like, I also know when I beta read, I have to like really, you have to know that what you're suggesting may not be the right answer. Because I think that's like sometimes beta readers come in and they're like, I think you should do this. And it's like, you really have to just kind of say, hey, this part isn't really resonating with me. Maybe if you did this, it would be X, Y, and Z. But like, again, you choose, you want, like, I'm very like almost apologetic, because there's a certain level of like, hey, but like, if you want to, go for it. Here's a light suggestion. If they choose an element of my suggestion or it sparks something, great. But it's funny because I didn't anticipate, in the larger scheme of things, not saying like for my own book or my own readers, but just how many beta readers come in thinking that their answer is the right answer.
And we hear that from our author friends too.
Yeah.
I think that one thing I do when I beta read, and thinking of one of our friends for whom I usually get through like the first few chapters and then I'm like, I'm so sorry, I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
But I remember one particular scene, I was like, oh, you describe this cut, but the placement of it can actually cause someone to die. And I only know that because this happened to a friend of mine. So just for your awareness, I don't know that it's earth shattering. I don't know that anybody's going to care. Here's some other places they could get cut that might be better.
Yeah.
Question mark.
You had similar feedback not getting cut, but you got feedback from one of your beta readers that was just like, oh, I didn't know that. Like,
oh my
about
God.
Like certain things where I was like, huh. Like, I mean, I think that's some of the most like helpful things when you're just sort of like, you know what? How are we supposed to know every single thing that happens in this world?
Well, and it's sometimes I don't even know what to research. Like, So for example, half of my beta readers are like, I was in a sorority. You're not allowed to have events with alcohol in a sorority house. It's only at the frat house. That's why they're mixers.
How are you supposed to know what to research on that? Yeah.
I work at a university and I still had no fucking clue. And I didn't know I needed to research that. So I was like, wow, I have to change the entire first 50 pages of my book because of this fact.
And I think that's like my favorite type of feedback, like whether to give or to receive, where it's just this little tiny fact and you're like, huh. And even if it does have much larger impacts, because it's grounded in reality, it makes your book so much more real.
Right. The last thing I want is to write a sapphic story where half my population has gone, my readers have gone to a sorority and know that I got it wrong. Like that makes the book unreadable. I need to fix that. Yeah.
I think if there's any takeaway, revision is hell. You will feel like shit. You will feel like it is, that there is no end in sight. And then if you are fortunate enough to get an agent and then to get an editor, it just continues. And there is no end in sight. And then by the time you are done with your book, it is not that first manuscript. It will not be that first manuscript. And the more malleable you are, the easier the process.
Yeah. And that's why building the right team is also important. And remember, it is a team effort.
Absolutely. Find your Jack Antonoff to your Taylor. And on that note, if you guys have any questions, please ask us, because I know people love these types of conversations, the writing conversation. So yeah, leave a comment on Spotify or send us a DM.
Or tell us your process.
Yeah, I would love to know other people's. The more we interview authors, one of the things we love asking is, what's your process? Because there has not been an author that we haven't learned from.
Right. Everyone does things differently.
Single author. Yeah. And we just eat it up, scoop it up. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jack and Amy. Next week, we'll be discussing Belladonna by Adeline Grace.
If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps other readers find us. And of course, we'd love to hear what you thought of today's episode. Share your comments through our forum at booktalkforbooktalk.com, and we might feature your feedback in a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode.
For merch and more ways to support the show, head to booktalkforbooktalk.com. You can also follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at the handle BookTalkForBookTalk. And don't forget to join us by subscribing to Subtext Society Journal.substack.com to get more insights into the romantasy and romance world. Bye.
Bye.